Good evening. Tonight, Douglas Rushkoff delivers the Roth-Symonds Lecture, the 15th in the series that was funded in 2000 by W. Mason Smith of the class of 1965, who is with us this evening, joined by his wife, Jeannie. The series brings before the school speakers from outside the profession to share their understanding of interrelatedness. For this reason, the series typically, but not exclusively, seeks speakers from the social sciences, including anthropologists, organizational theorists, philosophers, and sociologists. Previous Roth-Symonds lecturers have been the sociologists Richard Sennett, Seth Laloux, and Saskia Sassen, the architect, legislator, and diplomat Richard Sweat, the anthropologist Arjun Appadurai, and the social critic and technologist Stephen Johnson. Last year's Roth-Symonds lecturer was the artist and geographer Trevor Paglin. The Roth-Symonds lectures are named for two of Mason Smith's classmates. One of them, Rob Symonds, died during the summer after his second year at our school as a result of a freak accident caused by lightning. The other, David Roth, a successful architect practicing in New York City where he specialized in affordable housing, was killed in 1995 when a gunman went berserk in the elevator of his office building. Tonight's Roth-Symonds lecturer, Douglas Rushkoff, is a 1983 graduate of Princeton who also holds the MFA in directing from the California Institute of the Arts and the PhD in New Media Culture from Utrecht University in the Netherlands. Douglas Rushkoff is a media theorist, a television commentator, author, and professor of media studies and digital culture at CUNY, Queens. He is recognized as a leading thinker of the digital age and the originator of such terms and ideas as viral media and social currency. His recent book, Present Shock, When Everything Happens Now, 2013, describes the constant movement of information and events flowing from Twitter, smartphones, and other daily routines. He is also the author of a dozen other best-selling books on media, technology, and culture, including Media Virus, Hidden Agendas in Popular Culture, published in 1996, Ecstasy Club, one I'm going to read, a novel published in 1998, Program or Be Programmed, published in 2011, and Life, Inc., How Corporatism Conquered the World and How We Can Take It Back, published in 2011 as well. Dr. Rushkoff is the inaugural winner of the Media Ecology Association's Neil Postman Award for Career Achievement in Public Intellectual Activity. He has served as an advisor to the United Nations Commission on World Culture and regularly appears on television while also contributing to the New York Times, The Guardian of London, and Discover magazine. It's my pleasure to welcome Douglas Rushkoff to Yale as he delivers the Roth-Symonds Lecture, Kairos, Chronos, Time and Space, Designing for Humans in the Digital World. Douglas Rushkoff.
Thanks. It's to be here. A little scary to be here after hearing the names of others who've done this lecture. But this thing doesn't actually do anything. Oh well. I had this great device. I'm supposed to be a tech person, but that's supposed to time you down for like, a 1 hour talk and all. But it doesn't.
Okay.
Oh, I know it did. Oh, it did. Look.
After an hour, I will replace the machine and yank you off the platform. Call the dean.
They have an app. They know what I'm going to say. The app people know what I'm going to say about them, so they're already they've algorithmically deduced their rebellion. It was interesting listening to myself being described. I definitely mix the high with the low, and sometimes get confused about which is which. But in some ways, that's a good thing. I mean, for me, the concepts of highfalutin Greek ideals like Chronos and Kairos, I mean, they occurred to me when I was watching The Real Housewives of Orange County with my wife. I mean, that's what she watches, and I'm married to her, so that's what I watch. And and I watch these shows as a media theorist. I like to think from this higher level of cultural observation. But what amazed me over the year or so I watched this show was how many communications difficulties these women have. Right? I watch it as a communications theorist. So why would communication break down between these women? And I use all the kind of classical filters that we have. Well, they're from the same socioeconomic group. They speak the same language. They look the same. They have the same values. They're in the same room. They're up close. They're face to face. Why should there be so many communications lapses? And then what I realized was that these women have so much plastic surgery, right, and so much Botox in their faces that they're paralyzed. Right? They can't make facial expressions that are consonant with the things that they're saying. So you'll see one of them say, my daughter's going in for cancer testing tomorrow. And the other one says, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Because she can't say it any other way. And then they show the first one. They'll interview her off to the side. And she'll say, oh, she doesn't care at all about my daughter. She was smiling through the whole thing. She doesn't care. They can't connect. And I realized that these women were really falling prey to the technological problem that I think that we as a society are falling victim to. And that's that they're using technology to try to lock down time rather than to enter the moment that they're in. Right? So these women have used Botox and plastic surgery to try to lock chronological time at age 29. And in doing so, they've made themselves unavailable to the actual moment that they're in the room with the other person. Right? And that there's no way to avoid that trade-off once you start to cling to that moment. And that's, as I understand it, that's what the ancient Greek notions of Chronos and Kairos are really about. Chronos is time on the clock. Right? What time did you crash the car? Crashed the car at 4:01 p.m. That you know. What time do you tell Dad that you crashed the car? Right, 4:17, 5:17? You tell Dad you crashed the car after he's had his drink and before he's opened the bills. Right, it's not a time on the clock, but a human time. Right, so the time on the clock is Chronos, that human time that only we can understand really through interpretation, through feeling, through experience, is Kairos. So these women have surrendered the Kairos of their intimate moments to the Chronos of their ideas about what age they should try to be. And this is what we've done, I would argue, this is what we've done with technology. Right? When I first encountered the internet, I saw it as something that was going to make more time. Right? I graduated college in 1983. This was the height of the slacker era. For those of you that missed it, the whole point of Slack wasn't just to be lazy, it was to have time to do the things you wanted to do. You watch Rick Linklater's movie, Slacker, and you'll see these people are sitting and talking Derrida and philosophy. It's not that they're not working, they're just not working at boring, die-yuppie scum sorts of jobs. Right? They're working in things that they actually care about. So creating more Slack, creating more time, is a way to get more time to do the things you actually want to do. So when we first had the internet, even before the internet, I was on a bulletin board that was called The Well, the Whole Earth Electronic Link, and it was this asynchronous conversation that we had online with one another. And the beauty of an asynchronous conversation is, you would, I mean, this was an old internet that most of you are too young to remember, but you would turn on your computer, you would log into a telnet program, you would plug the computer into this device called a modem that would hook it up to a phone line, you would dial up to a server, you would download the conversation to your computer, you would disconnect from the modem, you would read the conversation that's happening between these people that you want to be involved with. Right? And you could take a day, an hour, as long as you want, reading their conversation, and then you would think, how do I want to contribute to this conversation? What do I want to say? How do I want to present myself? And you would take hours to create this perfect screen-size paragraph that really encapsulates how you feel about something. Or overnight, it's kind of like chess by mail or something. You'd really take your time with it. When you had it just right, you'd plug back in, upload it to the thing, to the conversation, and then wait and see how people reacted to what you said. Right? So the internet was a place where we actually sounded smarter than we do in real life. Imagine that. The internet was a place where people sounded smarter than they do in real life. Right? You sounded like Christopher Hitchens. It was brilliant. It was great. And now what we did, and we can argue as to why we did this. I mean, when the internet was discovered, it was discovered by business. It was seen as potentially the salvation of the dying NASDAQ stock exchange. That this rather than just being this source of people watching less television, which is what it started out as. People were afraid the internet was going to kill business, families. The average internet-connected family in 1993 was watching 9 hours less commercial television per week. But this was a nightmare. Right? But when we realized that the internet could be used to extract value and money from people, well, we took the internet and turned it from this nice asynchronous device into an always-on device that's strapped to your body that vibrates every time somebody wants to ping you or update themselves or send you a picture of this. We live in a state of perpetual emergency interruption that used to be endured only by 911 operators or air traffic controllers. And they only did it 4 hours at a time. They got paid for it, and they took drugs to ameliorate the symptoms of it. We just do it as a way of life. Right? So what did we do? We took an asynchronous technology that was actually creating time for us and turned it into something that takes time from us. Right? It puts us in this, what I'm calling present shock, this sense of perpetual present. What's now? What's now? What's now? The state of constant interruption. The only interruptions in media that I knew growing up was, I remember when Martin Luther King got shot, they interrupted the television broadcast. Right? Because someone's shot, or Wallace was shot. I remember that one too. Something big. When did they, those of you who are old like me, when did they interrupt a phone call? The operator would break in. Why? Because grandma's dying. Right? Grandma's dying, and they would cut in. The operator would say, I'm sorry, I have an emergency call. Now, you get call waiting in every call that you do. Right? So what's that saying to your body? What's that saying to your psyche all the time? Grandma's dying, grandma's dying, grandma's dying, grandma's dying. As if it matters. Grandma's not dying, somebody tweeted. Right? Why is that worth taking you out of the stream that you're actually in? It's there later. This is what's called an asynchronous medium. But we're using it as if it were an always-on synchronous medium. And we look at our Twitter feeds and our Facebook feeds as if we have to catch up with the moment. I'm always behind. I can't catch up to that. No, this is trying to catch up with you. You're living in real life, in the actual moment of the present. And these things are trying to catch up with you, trying to distract you from what you're doing. And we started to talk about time, human time. I remember in 1994, Wired magazine declared that we're living in an attention economy. Right? The real estate online is infinite. Right? There's this, you can make as many, essentially infinite. You can put as much server space out there and keep putting stuff in websites. The thing that they realized was finite was human attention. So they started talking about human attention. They came up with a metric for it. They call it eyeball hours. I don't know if they still use that today. Eyeball hours are the amount of hours that someone's eyeballs can be on your website or in your application. And the object of the game, the thing that started to teach, was how to make websites sticky. Sticky was what we wanted them to be, so that you get stuck to it. They even had an ad for one company called Real Media that showed people stuck on a piece of flypaper. And the slogan was, nothing attracts like real media. Being stuck on flypaper is not attraction, right? That's imprisonment. That's a bad thing, not a good thing. But that's the direction we went with it. And so that was going on, this state of of digital interruption that I'm calling present shock. This misapplication of an asynchronous technology, turning it into a synchronous one, and giving us asynchronous lives. That happened at the same time that I believe we shifted from a forward-leaning speculative society to a presentist society. I called that book Present Shock because my parents had, I don't know how many copies of Future Shock in their house. It was this giant bestseller, and it really was a bestseller not because people were reading it. It was more like a Piketty kind of a book. People just had it around. It was too long for people to really read. They didn't read then either. But it was around, right? People read the introduction, and thematically, it was consonant with a society that was leaning forward, leaning towards the millennium. All the shows we watched on the evening television were like on the 21st century. We watched things about monorails and going. We thought we were going to have jetpacks and live on Mars and colonize the moon. There was a very futury quality to America at the end of the 20th century. And it really started to reach a peak with the dot-com boom, the idea of the long boom. Everyone thought we can speculate and grow forever. Right over at Harvard, or MIT, they were saying, this is it. We're going to have infinite growth that just like the universe can expand forever, so too can the economy. It's going to grow in an unbounded fashion forever, and the internet's going to it's just going to go, go, go. Right? That was going on at the same time that we were just even numerically moving towards this thing, this Y2K. And that's why we had these great fantasies, the Y2K bug. Do you remember that? People thought that when the clocks changed from 1999 to 2000, that all the computers were going to break because they didn't know how to do 4-digit years. KLM Airlines grounded their fleet because they thought planes were going to fall out of the sky when they were unable to compute what happened. Nobody knew. There was this sort of harmonic convergence, year 2012, transhumanist, what's going to happen, leaning forward toward the year 2000. The NASDAQ stock exchange got past 5,000. Oh my God. Then the year 2000 happened, and people were like, well, now what? And now what really means now what? Right, so we went from a speculative, forward-leaning 1990s, here it comes the millennium, end of Messiah, God knows what. And we could talk about the media that allowed that to happen. That's really it's an artifact of text and contracts and the covenant. And as a media theorist, I see it all as the age of print and broadcast finally ending. But that's kind of another conversation. For our purposes, as a society, we went from this forward-leaning one to one that was in the present. Then 9/11 happens, which is another huge discontinuity, as big for us as the JFK assassination was for our parents, this sort of moment of discontinuity that, again, was covered by media in a way, and we saw it from all angles, the same way we looked at Kennedy kind of sequentially. These two things combined to put our society in a state of what I'm calling present shock. And I think it's both scary, but ultimately a great opportunity to reconnect to Kairos, to human time, which is not inaccessible to us. It's just a little distant from the way we think about things. We think of Kairos as laziness or soft or somehow disengaged, when I'm arguing that it's in some ways more engaged. But these two factors, our misapplication of digital technology temporally, and our shift from a 1900s to 2000s society led to this moment, this gaping kind of abyss, an existential pause. And as you know, if you're in a treadmill society, the last thing you want people to do is pause. Right? They can't pause because when you pause, people are going to start thinking, and that's going to be weird. They're going to start wondering, why am I working? What am I doing? What is this money? What is this thing? They're going to start reevaluating. No thinking. Just go. Right? So the first casualty of this new kind of presentism, I think, was narrative. What I call narrative collapse is the death of the traditional story. We could even use this, actually. It's like a real classroom. I mean, remember we learned this? This is narrative. That's what Aristotle figured out about the great Greek tragedy. Can they see it up there?
Why don't you raise the screen?
It's like that. If you can, let's do it. Cool. So we learned this was narrative. Right? You create a character the audience likes. That character makes a series of choices that puts him into danger. The audience follows vicariously up the inclined plane of tension until they can't take it anymore. And then up here, we have the recognition and reversal, and then crisis, climax, and relief. Right? So it's crisis, climax, sleep, the sort of male orgasm curve of narrative theory. Right? For a male millennium or two. Right? Now, what happens when you have remote control or any kind of digital device to deconstruct this thing? It stops working the same way. Right? If I'm going up the inclined plane of tension, especially if I'm watching a 30-second advertisement about some kid who's got a zit and she might not get to go to the prom because it's this thing and she's poppy, she's doing all this bad stuff. We're going up the inclined plane of tension, watching her make the zit get worse and worse. If my father's watching this commercial, he's got to sit there. If he wants to change the channel and get away from that story, he's got to get up off the lazy boy chair, walk up to the television, there was a dial, turn the dial and adjust the rabbit ears, which it used to come in through the air, and it was a whole thing. Adjust the rabbit ears and then sit back down in his chair, go pop. Right, there's like 50, 60 calories of human effort to get out of this inclined plane of tension. Or he could just accept 10, 12 calories of anxiety until he gets the Clearasil or the Oxy 5 or whatever it is. It's going to let him out of the anxiety. What's he going to pick? The path of least resistance. I'll take my anxiety. But a kid with a remote control watching that same commercial makes the same calculation, 0.0001 calories of effort, and I'm out of that imposed state of anxiety. Right? So instead of this, they're going to get that. They're going to jump onto the game and then go on to the cartoon and then go on and come back here after this commercial's over. I mean, watch yourself or someone watching television with a remote control. Right? They're no longer watching television. They're watching the television. Right? They're outside the original context of the TV. Right? They're watching the TV and watching what's on tonight. And they manage. You always do. You get back to Law and Order before they figure you get there. You know what I mean? You get to the game, you get to this, you see what you need to see, but you're no longer seeing it from within the context of the narrative. You're seeing it from outside. But that's why we started to make narrative that no longer follows this rule, or if it does, it follows these rules as almost a little wink and a nod to traditional narrative. You look at The Simpsons, which has been around, 26 years now or something like that? What is The Simpsons was the first show that said, this is less important to us than something else. Right? What's happening in The Simpsons is a series of connections. The object of the game watching The Simpsons is to figure out what are they satirizing here, what are they satirizing there. Oh, I remember that commercial. Oh, that's an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Oh, this is that. Oh, this is that. So the reward that you're getting is not this big final reward at the end. You're getting this series of little connections that you make. Oh, I got that. Oh, I got that. Oh, I got that. We don't really care if Homer Simpson makes it out of the power plant before it explodes. Or even if he doesn't, he'll be back next week. What we care about instead are these little moments. And if you look at the media that was coming out right around that time, in Mystery Science Theater, it was what? Do I get this joke? Do I get that joke? What are they? They're making Andrew Lloyd Webber jokes in a science fiction B movie, and I'm supposed to get that. Right? But when I do, what do I get? I get that sense of reward, the sense of now I'm recognizing patterns in a seemingly random sea of media. Now I'm making the connections. I'm seeing these things. Beavis and Butthead, all of these shows, whenever you see a screen within a screen, a kind of a South Park-like media within media within media, you realize that the pleasure is no longer this linear pleasure, but this sense of being able to frame something and reframe and recontextualize it. It's that sense of recapitulation. So you look at the shows that we've got now in an atemporal landscape. You look at, what's a biggie, like a Game of Thrones. Right? No one really cares who's going to win the throne. You don't want it to get there. Game of Thrones is structured more like a fantasy role-playing game. Even the opening credits of Game of Thrones, what are you doing? You're going over the map of the city, of the whole place, as if it were a game of Dungeons and Dragons. And there's too many characters. You like too many of them. You don't want it to get to the place where someone wins the throne, because then the game is over. Right? So we move, not just in media, but even in gaming. We move from kind of winner-takes-all agonistic play between teams, where winning the game means ending the game, to much more of an open, infinite game, as James Carse would put it, which is a great little book on this, an infinite game where you don't want to win because that would end the play. Instead, the object of the game is to see how long can we keep this game going. Now you can argue, oh, that's bad, these are bad values, and of course parents were all upset about these kinds of games, but what's important about the values of these games is that they're not looking for finality. It's not about getting to the apocalypse or to the end and winning. It's about maintenance. It's about sustainability. It's about how long can we keep this going, which to my mind is a much more pertinent question to us as a society now. How long can we keep this thing going rather than how do we get to win? Because what is even winning? So as you move from this narrative culture into a video game-like culture, we move, instead of watching someone make a series of choices and vicariously live or die through him, we are now in first person, right, making the choices ourselves. So the experience, both culturally and in this metaphor I'm using of a video game, is now we have the experience of moving from choice to choice to choice to choice. Right? And in the first person, it's me making these choices. That's why the kids wear those little bracelets now, the Christian kids. What would Jesus do? What is that? It's as clear an example of a church moving from Jesus died for your sins to what would Jesus do? This is the way you're going to be Christian now, is through your series of choices in this moment. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it's different, right? It's shifted to something else. Now, what we did with digital technology, one of the mistakes we made is we told people, well, yeah, we're moving from choice to choice to choice to choice, but what digital technology will tell you now is you can choose both. You don't have to choose this or that. You can do both at the same time, right? You can tweet while you Facebook while you're sitting in your class. But you can multitask. You can maintain, just like a computer chip, you can put some of your stuff in this piece of memory and some task here and some task there and some task there and let them all operate in a parallel processing way, and then they'll come back to your brain. Doesn't work like that. Right? Turns out we only really have one consciousness at a time. And what we can do, we can shift. I can do Twitter, then I can do Facebook, then I can do Twitter, then I can do Facebook, then I can listen to the teacher, then I can do Twitter, then I can do Facebook. Or is it Twitter, then Facebook? Sorry. Oops. You know, that really happens too. And that's when you realize what happens when you multitask. With every experiment that we've done on multitasking with kids, even at Stanford, the computer science people who really believe they're great at multitasking, objectively, they always stink at it, even when subjectively they think they've gotten more done. Objectively, they're less accurate, they're slower, they have a lower volume of stuff that's done, and it's not like we're going to develop some super multitasking ability. You know, people evolve really slow. You know, it's like the multitasking hemisphere of the brain needs to be lit up, you know, and Google's going to write a program that's going to suddenly make that. It doesn't really work like that. That's not, unfortunately, that's not science. So instead we tell ourselves, and this is what I call digiphrenia, that we can be in more than one place at the same time. The problem with digital technology is never that we're being overwhelmed with data. They used to say it was information overload would be the big problem. I've never experienced information overload because I can only see so much information at a time. Right? There's a ton of information, but I'm still reading at around 5,600 baud, I guess, or 24, I don't know. That's not the problem. The problem is having more than one instance of myself operating simultaneously. But there's my Facebook self over there. God knows what's happening. And my Twitter self. My email inbox is filling up with stuff. Mark Zuckerberg might be advertising with my image right now, something that he knows that I might want someday. But there's all these different selves I have to maintain and worry about because they're operating even though I only have one consciousness. You know, it's why drone pilots, it turns out, you know, drone pilots experience higher levels of post-traumatic stress disorder than real pilots. You know, why is that? You know, and I started looking, I spent some time with them. The reason why is because they're dropping bombs on people from their hangar in Nevada all day long. Then they get in a car, drive home, and have dinner with their wife and kids. Oh, how was second grade today, honey? You know, it's that sense of distance. They're in more than one place. They're not on the war zone. The ones who are in war, they go back to a bar with other pilots at least and have a drink and share their experience rather than being literally in two worlds at the same time. You know, and the reason why we don't get this is because the digital media environment is convincing us that time is somehow generic, that time is Chronos, that this time and that time and that time are all just the same. So you can just go from, now there's the war part, now there's the driving part, now there's the hug my second grader part. And it doesn't really work like that. Time, it turns out, is not generic at all. You know, what we're discovering now, even in neuroscience, and this should be interesting to you guys, is that over the course of a lunar cycle, people's neurochemistry changes. In the first week of a new moon, people tend to be dominated by acetylcholine, and the second week by serotonin, the third week by dopamine, the fourth week by norepinephrine. It's like, well, what does that mean? If everybody's in serotonin week, and now everybody's in norepinephrine week, and now everybody's in acetylcholine week, it means different weeks are actually better for different things. You ever have a week where you just can't get work done? It's probably dopamine week. That's supposed to be party week, not get work done week. You know, norepinephrine week, that's the fight or flight neurotransmitter. So that's really good when you're going to do like this big, mile-high organizational, systemic kinds of stuff, as compared to the serotonin week, which is going to be much more textural, on the ground. What am I actually? Where are we going? If you understood that, if we understood that time is even just not generic, we would start to understand, oh, it's more like a landscape than it is a piece of technology. Because we're not. We are not generic. We have nooks and crannies and moods and things that we change. Another feature of this presentist world, this disconnect between the kind of time we live and the kind of time we're trying to live, is something I call overwinding, which is where we try to squish really wide periods of time into the wrong time scales. It's the Wall Street equivalent where someone, you don't just buy a stock now, because you're not going to buy a stock and then wait a year and see if it went up or down. Right? The day that Facebook went public, people bought the stock and they were angry 10 minutes later that it hadn't gone up, because they think they're going to make money on the trade itself. I want to make money by buying I've got to wait a month to see if it goes up. So if you don't want to wait the month, what do? You buy a derivative, because now you can buy the stock a month from now. So you squish that 30 days. If that's not enough, you could buy the derivative 30 days from now and squish that, or buy the derivative of the derivative of the derivative 30 days. So all you're doing is taking all these big, big pieces of time and compressing them again and again and again. And we're so much more committed to that. There's 80 times more derivative trading than there is real trading. Derivative trading got so big, the derivatives exchange bought the New York Stock Exchange. You know that the New York Stock Exchange was purchased and consumed by its own abstraction. What kind of a world is that? That is an overwound world. Even Facebook does this to you. Facebook, it's a temporal compression of your past and your future. There's people from 5th grade that I've spent 40 years getting away from who now show up and want to be my friend today, right up there with all my other friends, compressing all that time I've lived and loved to be that distant is now swooshed right back up into the present. Meanwhile, Mark Zuckerberg is sending me advertisements using big data from the future I don't yet know I'm going to have. Right? He knows if I'm going to turn gay or get divorced or get cancer or have erectile dysfunction before I do. Or his algorithm certainly. So that future is now being pushed back at me too. So I can't just be here now in any way. Right? There's my past, there's my future. Where's me? Where's me? Woe is me. The other great mistake we make is something I've been calling fractal noia, which is I think we owe it to Gregory Bateson and Mead and the people who really looked at systems theory as a means of control rather than as a means of pattern recognition. And what we've done is how to say it in a fast way. We've gone, in some ways it's great, we've gone from a command and control understanding of the world to one that's much more iterative, and we understand feedback and iteration, but we don't really know how to see it, how to listen to it. So what would be an example? A company sends out a tweet that ends up going bad on them. right? They send a tweet that turns out is racist, or they didn't realize it said something, uh-oh, you can't take it back, and now all the other stuff's coming at them, all the angry tweets, all this stuff. They can no longer tell then, as they try to fix the situation, they can't tell what is responding to what they've put out and what's responding to something else that's out there. They can no longer parse the difference between the feedback and the iteration. Right? So they're basically stuck in when you take a microphone and stick it in the speaker and you get that screech because you just get a loop. Right? They can't break it open anymore. So we have, and you guys work with fractals. Do architects still work with fractals? I did. The one other talk I did with architects, it was at RIBA in London. And I realized I had done a home improvement project. I had done more architecture than any of these people. Because they're actually just taking wood and putting the thing together, or the sukkah, but they were all into fractals, and the beauty of fractals is that you can look at you zoom into one little part of a fractal, and it kind of reflects a larger piece. They're self-similar. Right, this is a little bit like that, it's a little bit like that. They're really good and they're fun for pattern recognition. The problem is when you look at a fractal or a self-similar system and say, not this is a lot like that, but this is that. Right, this is that, and that is this. As above, so below. Oh, plankton do this, therefore people do that, therefore the universe does that. It's like, wait a minute, you're going crazy here. Right? And then you listen to conspiracy radio. When something happens, say, oh, that's because the HARP station in Alaska, they created a tsunami in Japan because they wouldn't sign the trade agreement on that, and American gold is going to go off the thing. This is what happens when you no longer have any of this. When you no longer have linear cause and effect logic to understand the world, you try to understand it in a snapshot moment. Right? How are we going to understand 9/11? Not the history of what we did with al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. No, we're going to understand al-Qaeda by taking a snapshot of the moment. There's the plane, there's this, there's a person, there's a that, there's a that. If you have to make sense of things by drawing lines between stuff, in the moment, you're going to draw too many lines. Or you're going to draw connections between things because you've missed an entire dimension. That's fractal noia. It's where you get into that paranoid state because you need to make sense of something. And finally what happens to us is what I call apocalypto. When you live in a world that's in the present, you start aching for a conclusion. Well, when is this going to end? What's going to happen? Where is it all going? And you even talk to the guys who are supposed to be the most atheist of our scientists and computer scientists and all, they're all big in the singularity now. It's like, oh, there's no God, there's no purpose, there's no nothing, but computer technology is striving towards greater states of consciousness and will soon reach it. And then it will manifest the natural order of the universe, and human beings can retreat into the subordinate role and keep people around, at least insofar as they keep the machines going, because they're going to take on from us. They create a story that our universe is information striving towards greater states of complexity. So information first, it uses atoms, then molecules, then cells, and organisms, and then maybe cultures, and now computers. So it will keep going until we get to the great omega point, which is basically good old-fashioned Christian Aristotelian story arc overlaid on something that doesn't really follow that at all, or doesn't have to. I suppose we can make it. But it's deeply anti-human in spirit. Which is why so much of what we see, so much of our future casting now has humans in just the worst predicaments and roles. I watch with all you guys. I watch all the zombie shows and zombie movies, and it's interesting. I don't think we watch it for fear. I think we watch it as a form of desire. I think we long to be. At least in the zombie world, your phone's not buzzing, your boss isn't asking, you don't have to earn money, you're not going to get tax audited in the zombie world. Right? You're just going to sit on a mountain, they move slow, you got a shotgun, you got your family, you get some food, you're getting laid, you kill some things. This is good, right? I think we look at it like that. Not the fast-moving zombie one. Those are kind of scary. The slow ones, it's kind of cool. But what are the zombies really saying? What is a zombie show about, finally, thematically? What it's about is is there a difference between me and the zombie? That's why you have so many, every one, you've got to have one where you look at the zombie and the zombie's looking at you and the character has to think, what really makes me different from them? I kill, right? I kill to eat, I try to protect myself, and then the blood happens. I'll even kill someone I know if I have to. We are not zombies. We are humans. Right? But these shows, just like Singularity People, have an inability to appreciate the human. They are anti-human. And when I tell them this, when I tell my Singularity friends, my great peers in the new media thinkery profession, they say, oh, Rushkoff, you just say that because you're human. Like it's hubris. It's like, well, fuck yeah, I'm a human. I am on team human. And I'm just not going to be, I'm ashamed of so much else. I refuse to be ashamed of my humanity itself. Yes, I'm going to be a humanist in that sense. I'm going to use humanism as my value system. But this anti-humanism, it just dovetails just a little bit too conveniently with the industrial age corporate model that we're using to develop our technology. It's just a little bit too convenient. Because industrialism, more than anything, was about removing human beings from the equation of commerce. We had, before industrialism, in the late Middle Ages, the age of cathedrals. You guys like cathedrals? The age of cathedrals was a peer-to-peer economy based in the bazaar. Right? Feudalism had ended. They had the Crusades. A bunch of people came back with all different weird stuff. Technology developed. We had the most prosperous time in Europe. Really, women were taller in late medieval Europe than they were at any time until the 1980s in England. Because people were having 5 meals a day. They were working 3 days a week. And it's because they had a peer-to-peer economy. They had local currencies, all these things that we don't really need to talk about exactly now. But they weren't living in a system that was designed to extract value from them. They were in a system where they were exchanging value with each other as they needed it in order to survive. And the two things that got taken from them was, one, their right to do peer-to-peer trade. Next one, we got the chartered monopolies that got exclusive province over a particular industry. Right? So instead of me buying shoes from you, now I have to buy them from the official shoe factory. And instead of you being a shoemaker, now you are an employee of the shoe factory. Right? And the second thing they came up with was central currency. So instead of us using market money to trade with one another, money that's really biased towards circulation, towards transaction, we're going to use borrowed currency that's biased towards speculation and growth of capital. That's very clever. What else would you do if you were an aristocrat who was looking at a rising peer-to-peer culture that was growing less and less dependent on you? Right? You'd come up with a money system that you made their money's illegal, so now they have to borrow your money and pay you back interest to use it. Good one. Right? That was clever. And the second was the only companies that can be in business are companies that I have a piece of, that I can invest in. And this was sort of the beginning of the death grip between government and industry. And whether you're talking communism or capitalism, it's the same problem. It's always, the two are exactly together. So industrialism's strategy, though, was to remove that face-to-face humanness from business. That was the point. So instead of you being a skilled shoemaker, I don't want a skilled shoemaker in my factory. I want someone I can go to the Home Depot parking lot, get some illegal immigrant, bring him in, and train him in 15 minutes to bang something in a shoe. Because that guy can't ask for more money. You can. Right? So in order to make industry work, we need to disconnect workers from the value that they could bring, from their actual competency, which is a very dangerous game that we played. And the second thing we need to do is now disconnect the seller from the buyer. So instead of me buying oats from Robert, the oat seller in my town, it's going to come in a plain brown box from 2,000 miles away. And this is where people like me came in. They hired people like me to say, what can we do to this brown box to make people like it as much as they like Robert? I said, well, I've done some anthropological analysis, and Americans really like Quakers. So, put a picture of a Quaker on the box, and then when it gets there, people are going to like that and like it more than him. More than him? Well, all right, I'll invent radio and television, which will give you a way to broadcast the image of that Quaker to that person before he even sees it. All these great 28-second commercials of Quakers doing great things and making nice oats, so when that box does arrive, he's going to go, oh, the Quaker, Quaker. Plus, I don't have to deal with Robert anymore. People. Right, so we remove the human element from consumption and from production. And that's really what the industrial age was about this removal of humans. Think about the, remember the Crystal Palace? The Victorian exhibition of, when was that,
51.
51? What were people looking at? They were looking at the machines, at the looms, at the stuff. Right? It was about the technology. This is what we've developed. This is how we've taken over the world. This is what we've done. Right through to the World's Fair, where people are being conveyed through things. You can just touch a button in this, and here's a nice robot who's going to help you. Right through to CES or Apple World today, which is about the stuff, never the human creativity. Or look at an old invention like the dumbwaiter. What was the dumbwaiter for? Was it to make it easier for slaves to get the food up? No, it was to make it so that Thomas Jefferson didn't need to see the sweaty slave who made the food. It's invisible. Just pull the thing. Food. Right? It's like a Star Trek replicator. There's no person there. There's nothing happening there. The same as when we get Amazon drones. You're not even going to have to see the guy dressed in brown who comes with the package at the door. You're just going to be a little drone flight machine, whatever they are, a drone plane. And Amazon Turks will do your work for you. Right? Advertising, which we already saw how it disconnects people, it replaces human-to-human relationships. That becomes big data and recommendation engines. Right? So again, you don't have to use anything interpersonal. And the equivalent of the chartered monopolies of that period are the platform monopolies of this period. Uber would be a great thing if the cabbies owned Uber. But Uber is not a great thing when it's got $15 billion of capital to pay back. How do you pay back $15 billion of capital on cab drivers? There's not enough money in that, right? The only way you do that is by flipping into another vertical, into another vertical, into another vertical. So what you need to do is not just have a successful, sustainable company, you need to have a company that can grow at least at the rate of interest, but preferably at the rate of the capital that they've been given. And people say, oh, don't worry, there's a long tail that's going to take care of everybody. And we all know the long tail doesn't actually work. That what we end up with all of our access to music and video, and anyone can make anything with their device, what we end up with is a world where there's fewer stars on the top and more completely unpaid people on the bottom. That the extremes, the exacerbation, the division of wealth and prosperity in the arts in pretty much every field is exacerbated by this access because we're using platform monopolies to do it. So the internet is a beautiful possibility, but not when we surrender its programming. That's what programmer be programmed meant. Not when we surrender its programming to people who don't really have our best interests at heart, but really just need to hit a home run for the VC that's given them $15 million when they're 20 years old to leave college and make this company. What we've forgotten is, and Adam Smith told us this, this is classical economics, we've forgotten, there are three factors of production: land, labor, and capital. Right? And capital is the only one that feels perfectly consonant with a digital technology, because capital is just it's numbers, and it can expand and it can grow. So digital technology is great for amplifying the importance of capital in the equation, but it's really also great at diminishing the importance of the people and the places, the actual place that things come from. It doesn't work well for bounded economies, and only a bounded economy can promote prosperity between people. A bounded economy, you can get some circulation of capital moving around, of currency moving, as opposed to unbounded investment where we're going to be everything to everyone. We're just going to keep growing infinitely. We're going to do this and win, right? As opposed to do something else, do something more Kairos-like. So yeah, I think that the easiest way to design and build in such an environment, in a digital media environment that is going to be biased, we can even say intrinsically, because of how digital technology works, it's going to be biased against human interests and human scale, right? Is to emphasize human interest and human scale in everything we do. And this is not regressive. This is not Luddite or anti-technology. If anything, I would argue my singularity peers, the ones who are, and getting employed immediately by Google when they come out of the closet as let's build a cathedral for the consciousness of the computer. I mean, they go there. The Turing on acid technologists of today, they are the reactionaries. Right? They are trying to use digital technology to pump another round of steroids into a traditional and extractive form of colonial corporatism. And I'm asking that we think beyond this unacknowledged operating system. If you lived in a world where every computer was a Macintosh, you wouldn't know that such a thing as an operating system existed. You would think that's just a computer. And I feel like that's our problem right now as we accept the ground rules, the tenets, the presumptions of a generic digital economy as our rule set. We end up limiting our development. We end up limiting our design to things that support that rather than supporting one another, the other people right in the room. So what I would ask we do, and hopefully in the next 12 and a half minutes discuss, is whether we can transcend this sort of limited notion of prosperity before we start talking about transcending humanity altogether. Because I'm going to be a human for the rest of my life. And I think most of you are too, I would bet. Nothing wrong with augmenting your intelligence and using technology to expand what it means to be human, but it's very different for humans to become, just as we were kind of servile to an economic model, it would be an equally or perhaps more disastrous choice for us to surrender ourselves to a digitally enhanced version of that system, because that one's going to be really much, much harder to stop. The technologies we're building today are not industrial age technologies. Robotics, genomics, nano, and digital are different kinds of technologies that when you set them in motion, they evolve themselves. They keep going. They act as if they were preserving themselves. They modify themselves over time. So what we program into them now will come back around at us again. Not karmically, weirdo, spiritually, but really. You watch a program that you design and watch what it does, and you'll see, oh, it has different values than I do. So we have to get better at programming those in, but we also have to get better at choosing to program them in the first place, rather than just jumping. It's hard, I know. You do all this stuff, and Daddy comes and says, oh, I'm going to reward you for what you did. When we little hacker people who loved the internet in the early days, no one believed us. People used to laugh. I got laughed out of editors' offices for suggesting that they'd be using email someday. My first book on the internet got canceled in 1992 because they thought the net would be over by 1993 when the book was scheduled to come out. They thought it was like CB radio, some trucker fad. It's bizarre. But it's not. I don't feel like we're late in this game at all, and I do believe we can bring a consciousness of the real time and place in which people live. It's easier than thinking about people, is to think about human scale. What is the scale at which I actually physically move? What is the scale in which I temporally exist? And then you start to get the beginnings. Oh, I have a message for you from Barcelona. I'll end with this. I went to Barcelona after I found out I was doing this, and I went with a Barcelonan radical and saw the the Gaudí cathedral thing. Yeah, duh. Of course you do. The Gaudí thing, and we're looking at it, and there are all these cranes around it, and he said, just lately they started to work on this thing way too fast. And I really took that with me, as if he saw a change, that they decided they want to get it done. So now they're bringing in the cranes, and he's like, now it's over. The cathedral, the thing, what it actually represented to him was gone, because it had left the scale at which it was functioning in that community for this sort of industrial need to let's finish this thing and get the tourists here and save the economy and do all that. He's like, another one gone. Okay, so I wanted to make sure you had that message, in case there's something you're supposed to be able to do about it. As architect people, right? You make a call. Right? Okay, so do you guys have thoughts, questions? Let's have a conversation. Or did I just throw too much in? Yeah.
Wait a minute, we need a mic.
I really appreciate the talk, and it's very provocative. And I was trying to decipher what you actually thought was the relationship between capitalism and media technology, because in some ways you're actually suggesting that the need for, let's say, profit, Quaker Oats and Mark Zuckerberg, drives these things. But on the other hand, you're also kind of implying that if we just get in touch with our own humanity or our own Chronos, those larger systems, capitalism, don't actually matter. That we can stop in some way. So I'm trying to, I guess, push you on what you think that actual relationship is, and whether this last description I have, which is we just get in touch with the humanism and we can stop it, whether you actually believe that.
The easiest way I can answer that is I got involved in the rave scene. Do you guys know what rave was? In the late 80s, early 90s. I got involved in the rave scene. And we thought, this is cool. We're going to have no agenda. It's just like love, connection. We're going to make this fractal and see where it goes. What we didn't understand was the political economy in which this was occurring. That the most powerful thing about the rave was that it was reclaiming public space, but it was a non-commercial activity. People weren't getting paid for music. It had certain boundaries around it that made it special, but we didn't know what those boundaries were. Or we didn't know that what the other was. So of course it ended up being a commercialized thing in the mall, like everything else. I feel that the same sort of thing happened to the net. Right? That the net originally was not just a government project, but it was in many ways a problem for big business, because people were spending time doing something other than production and consumption. The scientists who were on DARPA, on ARPANET, they were sharing recipes and talking about Star Trek instead of doing the work that they were supposed to do. Like the minute you connected people through these technologies, they started to talk. Even when people got fax machines, they used to send these awful blonde jokes to each other. And I always like, why? Do people think these are funny? No, they just want an excuse to send something to somebody else. So there was this deep sort of social need or a social rehabilitation that was going on. To a television hypnotized culture now had a medium through which it could start to find other people on the other side of it. And what I was hinting at, I think that if we want a story for where it went wrong, it was we so badly wanted acknowledgement for what we were doing. Like I was saying, no one would believe we would do email, no one believed anything. AT&T turned down an opportunity to have the internet for like $1. They didn't want it because they thought it wouldn't make any money. In that environment, when someone would come from a real company or with money and say, I like what you kids are doing. Instead of sitting in this garage making this stuff and eating pizza and drinking Coke, come have a real company. Come do a thing. Here's $10 million. I remember I used to get calls in the late 90s when people saying, I just got $10 million. I don't know what to do with it. We do the whole thing. We're just building it on 2 laptops. What do we do with the money? Just keep it. I don't know. It's like, there was just so much. Somehow the original dream or mythology of building technologies that would just help people communicate with each other, which is how everything was built. I mean, most everything you use today is just a spruced up version of something that happened from MIT or Champaign-Urbana or one of the universities. It was all shareware. Once we got that positive reinforcement from business, the narrative changed, and it kind of became, oh, they told us the story. If you drop out of school, and now instead of having these teachers be your teachers, now you've got a venture capitalist being your teacher. He's about the same age, he's had all these experiences, and he says, no, this is the way you do it. Here's $10 million. Now you've got to change your model so that it can pay back $200 million. Instead of this $5 million a year business you were going to do, that doesn't work because we only have a 1 out of 100 shot with all these companies, so we need them to pay back 100 times. Right? It's actually even a bad VC model, but it's the one they use. So kids they understand, we can't just have a successful company, we need a home run company. So I watch so many kids abandon technologies that would work and fulfill the dream that they had and be profitable because they're not profitable enough to satisfy the home run equation. So I feel like what we're not always acknowledging is that our development cycle is now built around some very perverse and particular needs of venture capital rather than developing for, well, what do they need? And if we did that, I'm all for digital technology because of what it can provide. So I spend half my time trying to convince, this is not Marxism or anything. I'm even trying to convince business people that you got a really bad model here. There's a lot of waste, it doesn't work, all your time. What if you invest in 20 companies that can get doubles or singles and triples rather than all home runs? Just to sort of, even show them the numbers and go, oh, that's a little bit better. But when you've got kids, it's hard. Evan Williams is a friend of mine since back when he started Blogger. And he needed like $300 to keep Blogger going back when. It was, and then he sold it to Google, and he eventually made a whole lot of money on that and some other things. And then after you have your first couple of $100 million, and you do something like Twitter, might you think there's another path other than, okay, you do it again. Now I'm going to go get Goldman Sachs, get Smith Barney, do a thing, get a thing, go to the... And when I saw him on the cover of the Wall Street Journal with under his face, $4.3 billion is what he got on the IPO day. It's like, how many 100 million or billion or whatever do you need before you say, oh, I don't need to use that model to do my technology development. I can actually develop it in another way. So it's tempting because people see this as, each one of these things as the next thing. But what you'll actually find is the best technological development happens right after the crash. We got social media happened and Blogger happened after the dot-com crash. Because people went, oh, okay, not interesting anymore. And when it's not interesting is when, of course, it's interesting. Yeah.
When you brought up the rave era, it got me thinking in the last couple of years, we've actually had some moments of technological euphoria. Occupy movement, Arab Spring. If you look at, for instance, the Middle East, the greatest concentration of Twitter users is in Saudi Arabia. Quite shocking. And then you start to think, okay, what is actually Twitter doing for Saudi society? Is there, and while your concentration this evening has been kind of on the, let's say, the capitalist side of technology, it seems to me, though, that there might be something else as well that we should be talking about, and maybe you see there being a connection to that, and that is surveillance. I mean, that's really the last year, I think, is no one's really concerned too much about capitalist system taking over their internet use, but really that they're being watched. How do you see that being incorporated into your thoughts?
It's interesting. For the first 10 or 20 years of internet-style discoveries of invasions of our privacy, the first one was when, I think it was, who was it? Lotus or one of the companies had this CD that was going around that it turned out it had information on all the households in America, and people were like, oh my God, they've got information on my household. And it's like since 1912, there have been direct marketers who've had little note cards that know what's your property value, what's your thing. It's just, so sometimes I'm even with the Snowden thing, I'm like, oh, you mean it took Snowden for you to realize what's going on? What did you think you were doing? Don't people realize that they are typing their private messages on the internet? It's on the internet. It's like, this is more permanent than if you etched it in the side of the Parthenon. But this is, and more distributed, and it's there forever. Do you know how easy it is to do a simple search on like your hard drive now? All your email is going to be that searchable pretty soon. These are just text files. This is nothing, and videos are searchable. So it's like the way I used to think about it to make myself calm was that the internet is a precursor. It's a test run. It's a dry run. It's a practice for a world in which we're all going to know what everybody else is thinking and doing anyway. That's sort of the Ravey mindset. The Ravey mindset is that human beings are evolving towards some kind of collective organism. We're pretending to do it with technology, and if technology doesn't kill us first, we might get to do it as a society. But what about the invasion of privacy then? If everybody knows what everybody else is thinking, oh my gosh, that's going to be weird, at least for the first few years. But the sad fact is, they already do. Have you ever gone to one of these shows with a really good lie detector guy? These guys that they can line up 10 people and talk to them, and he can show you how, oh, I saw she just looked there, therefore she's uncomfortable, that's why she's the one who did this, he's the one who did that. They just can do it. Right? And because what they've done is taken subconscious and subtle cues and brought them into consciousness, so now they can tell who's lying about what. Well, if he can do it, it means that subconsciously we're all doing it. There's no point in lying to somebody, because even if they think they believe you, deep down they know you're giving them crap. Right? They know it. So if that's the case, when I look at surveillance culture, I say, oh, so we get surveillance culture on the one hand, and we're getting legalization of pot and gay marriage on the other hand. Why? Because if we know what everybody's doing, we see, oh, everybody's smoking pot. All these guys are doing gay sex with each. What are you going to do? This is what people do, so you've got to start making those things legal. It's a weird little give and take that seems to go on there. It's freaky, but the more interesting way to look at the surveillance state is Google comes along, it's rising up, it looks like, oh wow, these are the kids that are going to win. Right? They're going to win against Google and against Lycos and the other people who are trying to index the world's knowledge. And then let's stick Eric Schmidt right in there. Eric Schmidt, who's got just such impeccable, DoD contracting credentials. I feel like that was the moment that they said to Google, either directly or indirectly, look, we'll let you run with this if we can have our guy, if we can have our backdoor, if we can be a part of this. It would be dumb for the government not to do that when it's in that situation, to say, do you want access to everybody's everything? And yeah, they have that. The only time I get concerned about it is in matters of selective enforcement. Right? So if everybody's doing something that's kind of illegal, but it's known by the system, then that's a big problem. And the other place I get more worried about it, is the sort of algorithmic prediction. And this is again, it's a temporal loop, so that's why it bothers me. I'm really into time. But if you have algorithms using past behavior of people in your statistical demographic in order to figure out how to influence your future decisions, that's a really dangerous combination. Let's say they figure out from my past behavior and the past behavior of other people in my algorithmic quintile that, oh, there's an 80% chance he's going to go on an unnecessary vegan diet. Let's start marketing him vegan stuff and the dangers of meat and bloody pigs and all this imagery, all the stuff that we've tested and we know is going to make it even more likely that he's going to go on an unnecessary vegan diet. So they get me up from an 80% chance and 20% chance of anomalous human strange behavior up to now 95% chance of vegan diet and only 5% of anomalous strange wonderful human behavior. So as we do that, as we make ourselves, what we're trying to do is to make people more consonant with predictive algorithms rather than predictive algorithms more consonant with people. So that's the kind of privacy that I get concerned about. That's why I sometimes just do weird stuff. I'll look for stuff I don't need on Amazon just to try to throw the damn thing off. Yeah.
An amazing talk. I find the mentality that you're talking about very real because I work as an engineer in Silicon Valley myself. But I also think that there are so many young people who are not as stupid as people think and very well-hearted who go into engineering, who go into Silicon Valley hoping to make a real impact, a real good impact to the world. But I think the problem is that like people become numb. And even if you are aware of the problem, it's really unclear. There's no guidance on like what are the things that you can do to actually make that situation better. So I have that problem myself, but what would you say or think are something that like we could do from the inside?
Well, three thoughts. One, Obama spoke when he was running as if he was answering that. We are the change we've been waiting for. We are the thing. We are it. But then he got into office and he didn't facilitate us being the change makers of our own blah, 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 blah. So we got Occupy, which was actually, Occupy was the response to the call that he put out when he ran, even though he wasn't connected to it at all and probably was frightened by it. But Occupy, was a post-narrative political movement. It was not about beginnings, middles, and ends. That's why CNN would go, Aaron Burnett out front, what do you want? What are your demands? We don't have demands. Well, how is this going to end? We don't want it to end. It's like, whoa! It didn't make sense because they were playing an infinite game that you can't condense into the 9 seconds on CNN. It was much more internet-y, open-ended, an open-ended kind of thing, but it doesn't play well in national media. Right? Because national media is about big, one-size-fits-all, industrial, generic solutions. So that's why I think, and it's sad in a way, the only way to do it is without glory and without size. I get emails so many times, all day, every day. There's some in my email right this minute from people saying, oh, I'm going to create a social network that will allow all of the world's activists of this to get together and communicate and share resources. I'm going to create a website that will serve as a clearinghouse for all of the people who have this sort of open and no, what they're doing is trying to the big, they want to do the thing. Where when we move to human scale, and that's what I'm starting to believe, it ends up being super local and super small. It's a different kind of a glory, right? You do great community theater, it could be as fun as doing a Broadway play, sometimes better, because they don't let you do the great play on Broadway because they've got other things, other fish to fry. Or sometimes they do, but it's another story. I was a theater person. Still sad. But
should we tell who your theater colleague was?
Oh, yeah. Kelly Easterling. I was Wong the Water Seller to her Shantae in Good Person of Szechuan. Yeah, she's brilliant, actually. She coulda, woulda, shoulda. I'm sure she did fine. But in answer to your question, what I mean is a small, slow, incremental, human-to-human, locally scaled change can still be modeled by other people. It can still, but it's where you're going to experience things. That's why I'm talking about bounded investment as opposed to unbounded investment. If you're going to make an investment, invest in something that's where you can kind of see it take form. I mean, what do I need those numbers in a Smith Barney account if I can invest smartly in local businesses? Then I get to eat at that Thai restaurant that I just invested in. My town is better now. My real estate goes up. So once you have a bounded circulatory investment instead of pie-in-the-sky universal investment, and that's not just in terms of money, but in terms of your activity, you get to actually experience some traction. And you have to hope that people are doing it in other places and communicate with them and get encouragement from them. But you can't wrap the whole thing. Yeah.
So how do you propose boundaries? What should be the boundaries of this economy? Because geographic relationships are becoming more incrementally irrelevant with social media?
Geographical relationships are seeming increasingly irrelevant because of social media, because social media doesn't care about our geographic relationships, they care about our product loyalties. Right? They don't care, they don't want me to have a conversation with my next door neighbor about our car engines, they want me to have a conversation with another 2004 Mini Cooper owner, even if they happen to be in Iowa, so that the only thing connecting us is the advertisable quotient, right? Not the actual community engagement. So no, yes, while social media may mitigate the local, I don't use social media to engage with people locally. You know, I'm luckily, let's see, well, right here, can you imagine us, you know, using it to talk now? I mean, that was what my book, Program or Be Programmed, was about. It was 10 commands for a digital age, and one of the first ones was, you know, that the digital technology is really good for long-distance relationships, really bad for up close. You know, but it's great for that. But no, just because the bias of that technology is against local, conveniently, so is corporate capitalism is against local, right? The Walmart doesn't want you to have local affiliations. They want you to have national brand affiliations. Doesn't mean that all goes away. The interpersonal doesn't go away. But not all of your bounded regions have to be geographical bounded regions. You can have a geographical bounded region with other people who are in your working guild. Right? Why can't you have a guild of programmers, a guild of architects, a guild of this? And that's a non-local. That's what associations are and unions are, and those are ways of creating bounds. So no, they don't have to be local, but local is a great starting point for people who are disoriented. It's like, oh, where am I? You know, oh, well, what's here? Then so much of your daily experience is spent in your actual body, where you're moving around. I mean, you guys know that as architects, that, you know, where people are matters. That it's such an easy, ready, you know, if you want to make change, you go outside. It's like, well, who needs help? You know, it kind of starts it.
Have we exhausted the questions?
There's one more here. Let's let him exhaust the question.
It's kind of continuing on your last point, but as architects, we have the potential to construct a sense of place or of true physical place, and that's something that's been lost in this presentist society.
Put the mic up closer so we can hear you.
It's been lost in this presentist society and also in contemporary architecture. So do you see place as kind of a radical idea?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, so I speak as a true architectural layperson, okay? So don't yell at me, because maybe they didn't mean any of this. I was in Rockefeller Center last summer, and I was actually surprised walking around. I felt like Rockefeller Center, even though these are big buildings with like offices, it felt like it was built for human beings. It felt human on some weird level. Something they did with space made it feel like it was my human body felt oriented and okay as it moved around in stuff that was much, much bigger than me, as compared to, say, going to a lot of places with big buildings and I feel like this little dwarf nothing. I felt, okay, whoever made this thing understood that at least that this is how big a body is. So I felt a little bit like architects can create structures dedicated to the human form and the human scale rather than whatever corporation they were built to praise. You know, we don't have to just build what's that clock for AT&T, you know, one of these things which has nothing to do with my little body. It's that. So right now, the architecture in my world that people talk about is Google as this cathedral and these campuses. And they don't feel to me structured for the humans working in them. They feel like they are structured for some next stage of consciousness that they're going to house within them. You know, they don't feel like cathedrals that are there to have anything to do with how I feel. You know, I feel like they're there at best to maximize the efficiency of my operation as a worker. So I feel like there's a tremendous opportunity in today's architecture to to start thinking again about, I mean, even this is weird. This is, I mean, nothing against anybody. If you built it, this is cool. It's all cool. It's all cool. But those things scare me as a person. They do. They don't make me comfortable. They're just on little sticks, and they could fall and hurt me. You know, so I don't know. I think there is a way just to acknowledge our little bodies in your big buildings. It could help reverse some of that sensation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.